Recently, David Cameron, in briefing the Queen before the just concluded anti-corruption summit in the UK, described Nigeria and Afghanistan as fantastically corrupt. In light of this, today we present some video clips and discussions on corruption in Africa. In his remarks at the third Anti-Corruption Convention in Kampala, Uganda, Professor Patrick Lumumba discusses how corruption is bad and hurting Africa, stating that even those involved in it accept that it is bad for society. In his speech, he stated how he is surprised at the level of tolerance and accommodation in Africa for corruption. Patrick Lumumba is a Kenyan who served as the director of Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission from September 2010 to August 2011, and is currently the director of the Kenya School of Law since the year 2014. Now let's listen to Patrick Lumumba.
Corruption is something that we talk about. It is something that we complain about. It is something whose negative impact we recognize. It is something that even the corrupt acknowledge is a bad thing. But the irony and the tragedy at once is that those who engage in corruption love it. The tragedy at once is that those of us who do not engage in it directly accommodate it. Our levels of tolerance for corruption in Africa is amazing. A long time ago, a great Greek philosopher said that it is in the nature of man to hang the small thieves and to elect the great ones into public office. We do that in Uganda, we do that in Kenya, we do that in Tanzania, we do that in Africa. And that is why Africa remains the poorest continent on earth. Today, many young Africans are running away. Not so long ago, 300 young Africans drowned in the Mediterranean Sea in Lampedusa because they were running away from Africa. Another group of young Africans drowned next to the island of Malta because they were running away from Africa. When you look at Africa today, whether you are looking at Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, or indeed any country in Africa, our richest men and women are the men and women who occupy public office. We live in a continent where we celebrate thieves and vilify good men and women. That is the tragedy of Africa. While every other continent in the recent past has moved in the right direction, Africa still remains, in the words of Tony Blair, as the scar in the conscience of humanity. We live in a continent today where, as the young man has said, our young women upon attaining puberty cannot afford sanitary pads, but our public servants have iPads which they do not know how to use. We live in a continent today where our leaders who preside over our health sectors have no faith in the health sector. When they are sick and their families are sick, they run away to seek treatment in Germany, in France, in the United Kingdom, in South Africa and India. Even our health ministers don't have faith in our health departments.
Incredible stuff there from Patrick Lumumba. Now we blend in a very related comment from President Barack Obama, where he talks about the importance of the rule of law in governance in Africa. President Obama.
I have to also say that Africa's democratic progress is also at risk when leaders refuse to step aside when their terms end. Now, let me be honest with you. I do not understand this. I am in my second term. It has been an extraordinary privilege for me to serve as the President of the United States. I cannot imagine a greater honor or a more interesting job. I love my work. But under our Constitution, I cannot run again. I can't run again. I actually think I'm a pretty good president. I think if I ran, I could win. But I can't. So there's a lot that I'd like to do to keep America moving, but the law is the law. And no one person is above the law, not even the president. And I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to life after being president. I won't have such a big security detail all the time. It means I can go take a walk. I can spend time with my family. I can find other ways to serve. I can visit Africa more often. The point is, I don't understand why people want to stay so long. Especially when they've got a lot of money. When a leader tries to change the rules in the middle of the game just to stay in office, it risks instability and strife, as we've seen in Burundi. And this is often just a first step down a perilous path. And sometimes you'll hear a leader say, well, I'm the only person who can hold this nation together. If that's true, then that leader has failed to truly build their nation. You look at Nelson Mandela. Madiba, like George Washington, forged a lasting legacy, not only because of what they did in office, but because they were willing to leave office and transfer power peacefully. And just as the African Union has condemned coups and illegitimate transfers of power, the AU's authority and strong voice can also help the people of Africa ensure that their leaders abide by term limits and their constitutions. Nobody should be president for life. And your country's better off if you have new blood and new ideas. I'm still a pretty young man. But I know that somebody with new energy and new insights will be good for my country. It will be good for yours too in some cases.
We now conclude with Patrick Lumumba as he continues against corruption in Africa.
We live in a country and countries today where the political leadership have no faith in the education sector. They bring unto us what they call free primary education or universal primary education, but they can never dare take their children to those schools. We live in countries where we claim that agriculture is the backbone of our societies, but we do not use technology to produce crops. Africans are dying younger than they were dying 50 years ago. We live in a country where Africans will energetically seek to amend the Statute of Rome while there is war in Mali. while there is war in Mauritania, while there is no peace in Somalia, while there is no rest in Eritrea, Africa is a tragic continent. And I want to submit to you that corruption is the source of all these. For some reason, a reason that I do not understand, Africans still engage in primitive accumulation. Many Africans, particularly those in public service, will never rest until they have homes in different capitals in the world which they'll never live in. They have cars which they'll never drive. They have beds of gold which they never sleep on because they have no sleep anyway. They buy food which they cannot eat because they long lost their appetites. We live in sad times. I had the privilege of serving as the director of the Kenyan Anti-Corruption Commission. But it would appear that I did not understand my brief well. Upon being appointed, I assumed that my mandate was to go out there and fight the corrupt. But the truth was that I was not supposed to fight corruption. I was supposed to appear to be fighting corruption. Immediately, me and my team tried to fight corruption. The parliamentarians, in their wisdom and in my own view, in their lack of wisdom, used the occasion of the amendment of the law to disband the organization and to send myself and my 4 directors out of office. The history of anti-corruption crusaders in Africa is one and the same. Their mortality rate in office is very short. Before I was victimized, before my victimization, Nuhu Ribadu before me had been victimized in Nigeria. Before I was victimized, McCarthy had been victimized in South Africa and his scorpions disbanded. Before I was victimized, my equivalent in Malawi had been victimized. Before I had been victimized, my equivalent in Zambia had been victimized. It would appear that in Africa, if you serve your full term, it is because you have refused to fight corruption.